Good evening, everybody. Keith here. Gonna hang out a minute because I want to go over this criminal civil full financial statement from the local county courthouse one more time to point a few things out to impress upon everybody the importance of just doing a little bit of research. And when I've been telling people, don't be afraid of this stuff, accept what they're giving you, get copies and stuff, and see the evidence that they put on the face of the record that proves themselves guilty. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Earlier, I made a video about this same document, and there were some things I pointed out. But I kind of walked over something I really did want to point out. And so as we look at this again, we can see the G is parenthesized, general civil, general /civil, and then there's a circle in front of it. And what they want you to do is fill in that dot. And so here they've got general civil and then criminal. And you see again, this time they don't have the capital, first capital letter parenthesized, but they've got the second lowercase letter parenthesized. And then we go back to the first letter, capital letter. Same thing with last. And then you see it says /firm. And then we've got first, and there's no middle name. Okay? It has to do with grammar and style. And look at that. The last name isn't complete because it's not a last name. It's a last symbols of the firm name, which happens to be Keith Little in all capital letters. And then we see the obligor with parentheses again. And this is the part that I want to point out. Notice there's no obligee, no payer, no payee. Do they not know that stuff? Do we need to fill that in for them? Do we need to find that information? But look at this obligor. Obligor is a number. And that number happens to be listed down here as an SSN. Social Security number. Okay? This is one thing definite we know and is on the face of the record. It cannot be broken down any further when we do a little bit of research. Okay? I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. The numerical identification. That is the numerical identification of the obligor. It is not identified by a name, but by a number. And when we talk about numerical identification, we're talking about numeradent. I've spoken on this before. Social Security number is a numeradent, a numerical identification. What they've put down here is not, I repeat, is not a Social Security number. It is, in fact, a TIN, a tax identification number. Okay? Or excuse me, a taxpayer identification number. And this is from the IRS site. And it says a taxpayer identification number, TIN. So from now on, they're going to call it a TIN. Put that in parentheses there. So from now on, when they want to say taxpayer identification number, they're just going to put TIN. Is an identification number used by the Internal Revenue Service. Again, instead of using Internal Revenue Service, from now on they're going to abbreviate and use IRS. In the administration of tax laws. A taxpayer identification number is an identification number used by the Internal Revenue Service in the administration of tax laws. Now watch what happens here, people. It is issued either by the Social Security Administration, and again, they're going to abbreviate and from now on call it the SSA, or by the IRS. A Social Security number issued, again, they're going to abbreviate, now you know a Social Security number is abbreviated SSN, is issued by the SSA, whereas all other TINs are issued by the IRS. Okay. Before we go any further, can anybody tell me what's happened here? Can you read that and see what they just told us? I'm going to read it. A taxpayer identification number is an identification number used by the Internal Revenue Service in the administration of tax laws. It is issued either by the Social Security Administration or the IRS. It is issued either by the Social Security Administration or by the IRS. Every incident where the Social Security number is used is a taxing event. It's under tax laws. When you go get your driver's license and you present that Social Security card as part of the identification to get that driver's license, it is now part of the tax laws. Every incident that they bring you into these courts is a tax case. And we're going to go on and show you and prove to you why we know it's a tax case. Taxpayer identification numbers these are all taxpayer identification numbers. First and foremost, Social Security number, SSN, Employer Identification Number, EIN, Individual Taxpayer Identification Number, ITIN, Taxpayer Identification Number for pending U.S. adoptions. And this is a curious one I'm going to go all out on someday, but we'll just leave it for now. But just pay attention. That's an important word right there. For pending U.S. adoptions. Prepare taxpayer identification number, PTINs. Do I need one? A TIN must be furnished on returns, statements, and other tax-related documents. A TIN must be furnished on returns, statements, and other tax-related documents. For example, a number must be furnished. What? What? What's that say, folks? A number must be furnished. Okay, ready? When filing tax returns, when claiming treaty benefits, when claiming treaty benefits. Right there. Where's the treaty, folks? We're going to show you here in a minute. A treaty is a multilateral agreement wherein two parties agree to a third sovereign party. Pay attention. You will need to complete a Form SS5 application for a Social Security card. You must, how do I get ATIN? Okay. So it's not saying you're required to, but it says you will need to complete a Form SS5 application for a Social Security card. You must also submit evidence of your identity, age, and U.S. citizenship. Now, wait a minute. We have to provide proof of U.S. citizenship before we even have U.S. citizenship? Or do we already have that assumed U.S. citizenship and you want me to bring it forth? You see the problem there, folks? You're not a U.S. citizen. You're not supposed to fill out the Form SS5. Period. Big problemo. So let's go on. EIN, an employer identification number. In regards to tax laws, an employer is defined as the performance of the functions of a public office. It is also known as a federal tax identification number, and therefore, again, proving the functions of performing the functions of a public office for federal tax identification purposes. How can I be already identified as a federal tax payer of some sort and have to prove it? Because it's an assumption and they want you to agree with the assumption. As used to identify a business entity. An employer identification number is also known as a federal tax identification number as used to identify a business entity. It is also used by estates and trusts which have income, which is required to be reported. They still have no requirement because it's all an assumption. Refer to employer ID numbers for more information. Now we've gone from a Social Security number that is given by the state to a federal tax identification number that is given by the United States. It is best to be sure your organization is formed legally. Commercially, before you apply for an EIN. Nearly all organizations are subject to automatic revocation of their tax-exempt status if they fail to file a required return or notice for 3 consecutive years. I'm not exempt because their exemptions don't apply because their rules and regulations don't apply. Therefore, their definition of tax exempt does not apply because it simply just does not apply. Period. Status: if they fail to file required return or notice for 3 consecutive years when you apply for an EIN, we presume you're legally formed. So when somebody files a case with an EIN or a Social Security number or some type of TIN, it is presumed in likewise that you're legally formed. They're not going to go through the effort to find out if you're legally formed. They're just going to presume it, and the clock starts running on the 3-year period. Let's go back now. ITIN. An ITIN, or Individual Taxpayer Identification Number, is a tax processing number. Processing number. Social Security number is a number related directly to the Social Security account. It is the Social Security account number without saying so. Only available for certain non-resident and resident aliens. I'm not an alien. I may be a stranger and sojourner, but I am not an alien. I have not alienated him. I am a stranger and sojourner with him. Their spouses and dependents who cannot get a Social Security number. Who cannot get. It is a will. You are not required. But if you want to get a Social Security number and you cannot get, this part tells us we are not required to. It is a 9-digit number, beginning with the number 9, formatted, pay attention people, formatted like an SSN, Social Security number, 3 numbers, a hyphen, 2 numbers, a hyphen, 4 numbers. These other numbers, the PTIN, the ATIN, EIN, Social Security number, all fall under 10. But each one of them has a different category. And a different format. Pay attention. That is not the same format. That is not a Social Security number. That is, in fact, a tax identification number, but it is not styled as a Social Security number. Neither is this. Even though they say it's a Social Security number, it is not formatted as a Social Security number, and therefore it is a misrepresentation and a straight-out bold lie. False and deceptive format. False and deceptive form. Blank, point, period. It cannot be construed any other way. It is non-reducible any further according to the observance in, on, and for the record. The Social Security number is formatted as such. An employer identification number, EIN, is a single 9-digit number that IRS assigns in the following format: two numbers and a hyphen followed by 7 numbers. It is used to identify the tax accounts of employers and certain others who have no employees. However, for employee plans, an alpha or example P or plan number example 003 may follow the EIN. Online Taxpayer Identification Number Matching Program, Publication 2108A. Intended audience for this publication are members of the third-party payer community and their authorized agents. You are the authorized representative on that Social Security card, folks. You are the authorized representative therefrom for any banking accounts that use the Social Security number. You are the authorized representative for the driver license. The third-party payer community issuing Form 1099 statements of income for recipients of proceeds from real estate brokers and broker exchange transactions, dividends and distributions, interest income, merchant card, third-party network programs, merchant card, third-party network payments, not program payments. Pay attention to that one. We're going to do some research there too. Miscellaneous income. The ones everybody's in on now is the original issue discount, 1099 OYD. Taxable distributions received from cooperatives. Non-employee compensation. Non-employee compensation. You are not an employee. You are only considered as an employee for safety and risk management purposes, taxation purposes, under the Social Security Administration. Payments that are subject to backup withholding under our IRC. Again, payments that are subject, we're not subject. These guidelines provide procedures for the Internal Revenue Service's Taxpayer Identification Number Matching Program. The program is established for payers of Form 1099 income subject to the backup withholding provisions of Section 3406. Payers of income. You guys aren't making income. Income is from an investment of a financial instrument. You're not taking those financial instruments home and then investing them. When you deposit them in the bank is. And while the employer is operating on that Social Security number or the driver's license number or both, they're getting compensation through income on their side of the investment. But you yourself are not making income. You are earning wages. The IRS will maintain a separate name. Get it, folks? The IRS will maintain a separate name, TIN, name/TIN. Last name, firm tax identification number. Pop! You guys catch that? Name, TIN, taxpayer identification number, database specifically for the program, and will inform the payor whether or not the name TIN combination furnished by the payee matches the name TIN in the database. You see what we got here? What did we just get here, folks? Did we just get the obligee, the payor, and the payee? Can we now fill this out and fill out the rest of the truth on the face of the record and make it patently observable and non-reducible? And prove on the face of the record that they have committed a tortious action in their multilateral agreement amongst themselves and kidnapped a living being? It's as simple as it gets. And I can't even be hopping mad about it now because I'm so frickin' joyed that I can announce it anytime I god dang well want to. Because they all know what's going on here. They're all bankers. They all know the trust, and I can express every last one of those trusts. I can show you the trust right here with that obligee, the payor, the payee, the obligor, who they all are, how they switch positions. Oh, check this out. Let's talk about obligee and stuff here real quick. First, obligor. It says the obligor party in a bonding arrangement is one of three parties. Three parties. Remember I told you about multilateral agreements are agreements between two parties based on a sovereign authority thereof? That's your third party. The principal is the third party. Who are the other two parties? They are the obligor and the obligee. The obligor party in a bonding arrangement is one of three parties that are all part of a contractual agreement that binds them together. According to the Hanover Group, the bond itself is actually sold by the obligor to a principal, generally a contractor or subcontractor, who has agreed to perform some action or body of work for a hiring entity known as the obligee. So we have a municipality as an obligee that hires a contractor known as a police officer who bought it, and it was sold by the obligor. Known as the obligee in the arrangement. So the officer is the obligee, The municipality is the obligor. And they expect you to step up as the principal for the true principal, the state, and co-principal, United States, in a trust relationship who are actually trustees, co-trustees of the monetary system they're using against you in these commercial contractual bonds. Most industries in this country make use of bonds because of their inherent usefulness of providing assurance that a contracting party will meet the terms of quality, timeliness, and compliance which are detailed in the bond's terms. Obligee responsibilities. By the law, the obligee is required to provide information needed to process the case and manage the order. The officer is seeking out information, and that is his requirement. He is required to provide information. He then hands that information off to the prosecutor, who is again in that same position as obligee, required to provide information to the clerk of courts, who again is in the same position as an obligee to provide information to the assignment of a magistrate to oversee the case needed to process the case. They're all operating as obligees at different times. They're all the corporate entity, every last one of them. Surety. In finance, a surety bond or guarantee involves a promise by one party to assume responsibility for the debt obligation of a borrower if that borrower defaults. Again, we see the officer steps up and gives a promise to the municipality to assume the responsibility to uphold their regulations, which is his debt obligation of the borrower to place those rules and regulations for safety concerns and risk management, which is the requirement for his job alone. And they do so as a borrower in contract themselves with the United States under federal acquisition regulations to borrow the use of the funding, the Federal Reserve notes. That's their guarantee. The circulation of Federal Reserve notes. A surety bond or surety is a promise by a surety or guarantor to pay one party, the obligee, a certain amount. So at different times, they're playing different parts of obligor and obligee, and they've got you set up as the principal who's supposed to do all the performance. They've abrogated that position. So we look in the overview here. Reason for having a guarantor. My guarantor is that multilateral sovereignty, my Father in heaven. The United States industry operates under a Miller Act, may require a surety bond for contractors on certain federal construction projects. There is no other need for a surety bond or requirement for a surety bond unless the government, through the Miller Act, may require so. States have adopted their own little Miller Acts. Adopted. Remember, we spoke about adopted earlier. The surety transaction will typically involve a producer, or informant giving the information, producing the information. The National Association of Surety Bond Producers is a trade association that represents such producers. Trade association. Remember I spoke about the federal trade zones. Foreign trade zone is a grant by the federal government. They act as grantee or guarantor. Again, through rights of subrogation. United States, through the 14th Amendment, has placed yourself as the principal, as well as the state. As co-trustees, they both together have abrogated the position of principal and put you in as the principal. And you are the one that is supposedly required to perform. Yet, the obligor is a number associated with the Social Security number and not known as an employer identification number, not assigned as an employer identification number yet, but clearly a taxpayer identification number, because it's listed as such here, as if though it's a Social Security number. But it's not a Social Security number. It is like kind, as well as the driver's license is a like kind as well. It's consisting of seven symbols, or 9 symbols. And it was derived, it is a derivative of the Social Security number, which was presented, and it here is being presented as if though it's without the hyphenation. A lot of serious questions to ask about this evidence that they placed in, on, and for this public record, or this record that I have, that I'm placing in the public domain under Isaiah 54. I'm supposed to sing and not let any evil prosper against me. This is clearly not myself. And as you see, it's Keith without any middle name. And then the last name, Firm, is not fully established here. And that is not a mistake. That is, like I said, a ticker symbol for stock exchanges, commodity exchanges. Notice the difference between case ID here and case ID here. This one here is a number with hyphenation. It's a matter of 5 numbers. And down here, the case ID, it isn't doesn't have a parenthesis, and it's in smaller case letters, not just lowercase, but smaller, styled cased, and it has some kind of corporate entity here with the last name first, and then the first and middle. Again, without hyphenation, but associated with a case ID and a case ID. But again, we've got a number that's hyphenated. We've got a name that's not complete and a number that's not hyphenated. With no obligee listed, a payor listed, or a payee listed. But we already know there's multiple obligees. They're all playing the part of obligee. I, however, am never the obligee. I never willingly entered into this contract to perform in any manner as obligee, obligor, payor, payee, or principal. None of them. Now that I'm of a knowing character and know how this operates, they can't possibly demand it upon me. Like I said, when I call up the Treasury Department and ask them about the offset on a debt, both public and private side, and they ask me for that Social Security number, and I give them that Social Security number, and they come back and tell me that there's no debts listed, public or private. What are these yahoos doing, trying to profess that a Social Security number that isn't properly styled and hyphenated is professing some kind of debt according to a name that they stylize in multiple different ways? Here we found the 7th way that they supposedly styled the name in regards to the case that I have 4.5 years ago where I refused to sign documentation on the way out the door. I refused to release my personal services. I refused to engage in these contracts of obligations and paying. You can't pay. 1979, it was adjudicated that legal tender is no longer in existence. There is no such thing as circulation of legal tender anymore. It's only an assumption because it's merely a promise to pay. You can't pay anything. It's just a promise to pay through this commercial system. And it's all an obligation under 18 U.S.C. 8. They're all obligations and other securities of the United States, including stamps or other representatives of value. This is why your own hand-drawn stamp could work, as long as you know how to use it. And tell them, well, no, that's in accordance with that, and that's in accordance with that. It all comes down to the origin, the original source. So think about this stuff, people, and pay attention. They're putting this evidence in, on, and for the face of the record because of their own indoctrination. We just have to know how to show them that they, in fact, are proving it themselves. They are, in fact, incriminating themselves. Start reading them their Miranda rights. Notice of legal responsibility is the first element of the due process of law. Discovery is the second element. If they don't want to pay attention to their notice of legal responsibility and what you have discovered, then that's on them. That's on them. So think about it. And when I get done here again, I'm going to post my other forum links along with that PayPal link. Again, I operate on a doctrine of necessity just like everybody else, and I most certainly do need the people, my brothers and sisters, sending some love through the PayPal link. But otherwise, remember, I really also need you to share this information and get it out there so people can comprehend this stuff. It's really simple because all you got to do is point out their lies, their inconsistencies, their false deceptions, false and misleading representations. Most of these people don't know they're doing it. Point it out to them. Get them to comprehend in peace. Hey, listen, when I send this to William Barr and point this stuff out, and with records that I've contacted the Treasury Department, and they say that there's no debts, public or private, listed against Social Security number, and show them that somebody's listing this as the Social Security number, and this is the name and the firm, I have some serious questions. Please correct your records. I guarantee you they cannot allow this to exist on the record once I make it part of public domain. And I have the right to speak as such. Like I said, Isaiah 54 tells me, first word in the first verse is sing. The 17th verse tells me about not letting anything that they put forth against me in evil to prosper. So that's why I do this. Hey folks, if you don't like, if you're watching me still and you don't like the evidence that you've placed in, on, and for the record against yourself while you've kidnapped me and profess that your ignorance is so much wider and so much grander than myself because you live by the U.S. dollar, in God we trust, you better comprehend where that source comes from. Where the true bond is. Because I give a flying rat's patoot about your commercial bond. That's a contractual agreement that is dependent on a multilateral agreement dependent on sovereignty. And sovereignty supersedes in any treaty that you have ever signed or ever thought your country, nation, corporation, or entity, or whoever you work for ever signed. It has to do with what's here, not on some piece of paper. So think about this and remember, people, it's just as important to share the information, my forum links, the videos, share it all, get it out there. But don't forget me. I need the love too. In the meantime, remember, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be singing somewhere else, some other way. So God bless. Love you. Have a great night. and I'm going to pay honor to you guys. I pay homage to my Father in heaven. I pay homage to my mother in earth. And I pay homage to my brothers and sisters, my neighbors. I love you all. And this is inherent, that we do as we wish. We use things peacefully, particularly things that He's given us. God bless. Holy Sacraments. Bye.